Today we're going to be talking about the React hook use context and how to turn this into this. Hello everyone, welcome back to yet another web dev tutorial. There's a thing called prop drilling in React, and prop drilling occurs when you try to pass down a prop from the parent to the child component to the child to the child to the child of those components. And sometimes we need to do that because we need information from top component to a sub child of that top component. Not only that this doesn't look aesthetic, but it's also kind of an anti-pattern. In cases like this, you would want something like a global state where you can define the component and have it live in this global state and just reference it whenever you need it in all of the components below. Global state in React can be achieved in multiple ways. There's a lot of third-party frameworks that provide this, like Redux. I can't remember the rest of them because I haven't used them, but all of these are great for a big, very complex application. But if you have something more on the simple side, but not simple enough where prop drilling occurs, then the React context comes very handy. The other thing why we don't like prop drilling, because if you have a prop that you're passing down to multiple levels of child components, when that prop changes, all of those components are gonna re-render. And we wanna try to avoid that if you're only gonna pass down the prop without using it. Context provides a way to pass data down through the component tree without having to manually pass the data through each of the components. And in order to use React context, we need 3 steps. Create the context, provide the context, and a consumer that will use the context. Now I have an app here that I've created. This is just a simple, not good looking store app. But what I've done here is, this is the home page. We have a cart icon here. These are all the products. If I add a product to cart, I'll get this alert, and you can see that the data here changes, so it means that the product is now in the cart. If I open the cart page, I will see that the product is added to cart. This is the total. I'll just go and add a couple more of this product, and you can see the price changing every time we click that, and then the quantity here is updating. And the way that I have achieved this is I've created a state of cart items in the global app of this next application, and I'm passing that down to the layout component, then to all the components from the router. Now if you're not familiar how Next.js works, we can go into that in another video, but for now I'm just gonna explain how I'm passing the props down and how we can use context instead of that. And a good example of prop drilling is we are passing down the cart items to layout component, which doesn't use them, it just passes them down to the header component, which is this little code. Now if you want to rewrite this to use context, we can do that very easily by creating a context. We'll call this cart context. And because I'm using TypeScript, I'm gonna define what this context can, all the items the context will have, and I want to have cart items. The context will have values of the cart items, which is going to be an array of the cart item, and the set cart items, which is going to be a void function. Now we have the first step, we've created the context. Now we need to add the provider of this context and basically wrap the whole application, the provider of the context. You can do this by adding this. So now we've wrapped the whole application in this cart context. We're also passing down the cart items and set cart items from useState here. So this will allow us to use these values in all of the 3 components down below. So I don't need to send this anymore, and I don't need to send them here as well. Now it's gonna break my application because those are expected props. Just gonna remove these. There we go. Now these are all going to be undefined, and now we need to use the values of that provider we set. And we can do that by using the useContext hook from React. Actually, I need to export the context here. There we go. This is working. And here we go. Now this should fix our app, and we should be good to go with using context. Go, items added to the cart. Just add a couple more. You can see the value changing here, and we can see we have 1 of product 1 and 2 quantity of product 2. So that's, in a nutshell, that's how context works. Now the good thing about context, we can also abstract all of the context and the items in the context in a separate component. I'm just gonna go ahead and do that. I'm actually gonna move this to cart provider. Let's copy all of this. I'm gonna define a card provider component here. Of course, Copilot already knows what I need, and I'm gonna export this. And this should do it. Now I've abstracted. I'm just gonna remove the alert here because I don't feel like it's needed. But now that we abstracted the provider in a separate component, it's much more easier to deal with the cart and all the items in the cart. If we have any kind of logic here, we can just put it in this component. This gives us a great way to abstract the whole context and everything you need in that, and any kind of logic into its own component. What also I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create a custom React hook for our cart context, and this is just so we don't have to export the cart context and then use that in another file. So I'm basically just gonna do use cart context. This is gonna take empty parameters, and it's just gonna return use context of our cart context. And I'm gonna remove the export here, which is gonna break our application. Now let's just go ahead and fix all of that. Now this is just an extra step because I like to have everything in one file. I don't want to export the context. I just want to export component and this hook. And like I said, we can add any kind of logic here we want. If you want to have some kind of logic for which item you can set into the cart, we can define here a function. We can add logic. And then instead of this value, we can pass down that function. Now this is basically just going to work as before, but there we go. Now just to show the power of this, if I want to add a remove button in here, we can do that very easily now because we can just reuse the set card items from the context. Let's add some styling on this. There we go. Now we have a remove button. If I click, this is not gonna reduce the quantity, which is ideal what you will want, but just to showcase, it's just gonna remove the whole product from the cart. Let's just add a few products here so I can better demonstrate. If I want to remove this, you can see all of the items change. This is a separate component, this is a separate component, and all of it changes automatically. So that's basically how you can use context instead of passing down props and prop drilling. Now the obvious advantage of React context is no more prop drilling. The context will be available to the whole component tree, which basically means you can access it from any child of that parent provider. And this just makes global state much more easier to manage in React apps. Because it's very straightforward, it's very easy to overuse. And React in their documentation actually don't recommend using React context as the first solution. What they recommend is start with passing down props, and then if you feel like you're passing down props to a lot of child components and you feel like context could be useful and improve the app, that's when you do it. Also, in some situations where you just need to pass the prop down to from the parent to the child, and the child doesn't use it but it passes down to their own child component, in those cases you can abstract the middle component and just pass the prop down directly from the top component. And like I mentioned, there's other alternatives to global states. I've worked with Redux before and I really liked it because the whole dispatch reducer kind of workflow was very easy to manage. But those kind of libraries are much more for very complex applications. And the app that I was working on was very complex, had a lot of data to manage. There was a lot of users and different kind of products and just a whole lot of stuff that we needed to manage in one single app. But all of these alternatives also add a lot of complexity and sometimes they slow the app down. And the one thing I always try to make sure people remember, the customer won't care what kind of technology you use to make the app work. They won't care how many fancy libraries are used and if you're using context or which kind of global state you're using. They just want a good and fast and easy to use app. So yeah, that's been all for this video. I hope you liked it. If you have any thoughts, feel free to comment down below. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.